Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Ace and I'll be showing you guys all the weapon skills and animations and as well as the effects and such for the Ranger with all their weapons. This means above water combat as well as underwater combat. So stick with me. If you're looking for a specific weapon, time codes are in the description box below, so you can check that out. And I will be only covering the weapon skills, not utility spells or healing spells or anything else, purely all the weapons available to this specific class. Starting off with my favorite weapon, which is the two-handed weapon, and the reason why I like it is because of maul and swoop, but we'll start off with the auto attack, which is basically 3 hits. And as you can see, it does stack vulnerability on the first 2 hits. At least has a chance to do so. Nothing too special. Also has a chance to bleed. So, purely basic, straightforward, two-handed auto attack. Maul is basically a frontal cone application of bleeding effects. Or bleeding stacks. 3 of them, in fact. As well as a small damage as well. As you can see right here. And the reason why I like this attack so much is because it has that animal, that spirit beast feedback of an animation. As you can see, gigantic bear clawing down upon your opponent, which I really enjoy. Unfortunately, there's only 2 attacks that do it for the Ranger, at least melee attacks. And the third one is swoop, which is basically a charge or a leap, depending on how you look at it. And it gives you wings. As you can see, very smooth animation, very nice animation. It's my favorite animation of all the charges and leaps in the game currently. Not sure if they will change. I doubt it, but this is one that's my favorite. Doesn't do too bad, does nice initial damage. So very nice to use to get into a fight or out of a fight even. Counter attack has 2 applications. I will show you one right now. Which is just basically blocking, and then if you get hit, if you are blocking, you can see that you will kick and also pushes your enemies back. And while we wait for that cooldown, we'll show you the last one, the hilt bash, which is pretty straightforward. If you attack enemies from behind, does nice damage. Applies some basic negative effects, as well as dazes an enemy and has a chance to stun them if you hit them from behind. And also your pet does 50% more damage on this next attack when you use it. Not too too impressive, but definitely worth something if you are behind people. Alright, going back to counterattack, it's also a ranged attack. If you are casting and you click it again, you directly throw your sword, which does a small bleeding effect, also cripples the enemy. So it's not only a counterattack, purely a counterattack, it also has a ranged side to it. So quite decent. This is why I like the two-handed sword best. Moving on to the longbow. If we get out of combat first, so we have to do his head in. As you can see, the damage is quite nice, and this is all done at level 80 on the PvP testing grounds, which you can directly join once you get out of the starting zone. And if you're looking for starting zones, I have those videos up as well for every race. Alright, we'll start off, of course, with the longbow, which is very well known since Guild Wars already for its very large range. And the auto attack is pretty straightforward. Does quite decent damage. Not too fast, but that's what you expect with high hitting attacks. As you can see, the further you are away, the more damage it does. So definitely something compared to the initial Guild Wars. Rapid fire. Quite far range that you can actually use this ability as well. Pretty straightforward single target attack. Does nice damage. Hunter shot, as you can see, your pet gains swiftness, so it means it attacks faster, as well as makes your enemy more vulnerable. So definitely a shot that you want to be using if you are just starting off a fight and your pet still has to go there, if you want to get all the the damage purposes of your pet. Right, point blank shot, which has to be in range. And as you can see, it pushes the enemy back while doing quite decent damage for such an attack. And of course the last one, which is barrage. Barrage? I'll call it barrage. And it's pretty much a very standard AoE. As you can it applies very much some very standard but still very nice debuffs, bleeding, cripple, and all kinds of good stuff. So Longbow is a pretty powerful weapon for a ranger, just as to be expected since Guild Wars 1. Let's finish this one off. Alright, moving on to the short bow. Once we get out of combat. There we go. Short bow being, of course, of short range. Starting off with crossfire. A lot faster. Not as powerful per se. And still very big on the range for a short bow. And it also applies bleeding damage, as you can sometimes see popping up. There you go. Alright, poison volley. Pretty standard forward. Just a frontal cone spread. Nothing too special. Apply some poison. Nothing too impressive, but it also applies a healing debuff. So very nice for PvP purposes, most likely. That was a quick shot, which is basically giving you swiftness so you can get out as well. It does have to hit to give you swiftness. But it's a very nice ability to gain some distance, as well as perhaps a getting out move, if you like. A defensive maneuver. Crippling shot allows you to cripple the enemy. Also applying some debuffs beyond crippled. So, pretty nice if you are kiting people around, or NPCs in this case. Concussion shot, pretty much a stun attack. Nothing too special, but once again, if you are kiting people around or kiting NPCs around, quite decent, especially if you look at the range. Moving on to the next weapon, let's do a PvP sword. And swords can only be used in the main hand, and the horn, of course, as the offhand. And both of these weapons have their own application, which I'm very happy with. Starting off, of course, with the auto attack of the sword. As you can see, very impressive. You are pretty much going very wild with it. And then if you stab your foe with the second attack called Hornet Sting, you evade backwards. Which is another nice evasive maneuver. Of course, Serpent Sting, which is pretty straightforward, just a, as you can see, looks quite nice. Once again, the spirit animal feedback, which I really enjoy. You go behind enemies, do some attacks, and also apply some debuffs like the poison as well as the heal debuff. But when it comes to the horn, it's quite decent. Not only do you have, a personal buff for you and your allies. As you can see, you get swiftness, you get some might, you get some fury as well, which increases your crit, as you can see right here. So quite nice, but I think the most funny ability of the horn is, of course, the Hunter's Call. And as you can see, number of attacks, 16. So you think that might be a very powerful ability, and perhaps it is, but it looks more fun than it does damage. As you can see, eagles coming in left and right, attacking your NPC or the person that you have sent them to. Not too impressive on the damage, but definitely funny to look at. So if you want to have one of those abilities that you can just apply and don't have any thought of once again, or after that, you definitely want to get the Hornet. And it's a very powerful AoE buff as well, so if you want to be supportive, Horn especially the way to go. Alright, let's move on to the dagger. On the, well, we have to first get out of combat, of course, almost forgot. Let's summon in some more eagles. And finish him off while looking epic. There you go. And daggers can only be used, I believe, in the offhand, which is basically the horn. And we'll use the axe as the main end right now. And the axe is basically the weapon that you also start off with. Very powerful weapon because it ricochets. And as you can see, it does decent damage. Fires quite fast. Does have decent range. And as you can see, it just keeps ricocheting. Just a little bit out of reach, but what are you gonna do? Split blade, very decent bleeding effect projectile. As you can see, it has a frontal cone, goes pretty far away. And the bleeding damage, the closer you are, the more stacks of bleeding it applies. Alright, Winter's Bite is basically an ability you want to be using if you use a very offensive pet. Because as you can already tell, your pet next attack inflicts weakness. So you basically throw it, you cripple your enemy or chill it. And as you can directly tell, your pet will be able to inflict weakness after that. Moving on to the dagger, in my offhand of course, Stalker Strike. Basically, very standard ability, applies some healing debuffs as well as the poison damage. And it also allows you to evade attacks. So if you are in a sticky situation and you still want to do some damage, you might want to use this ability. And of course, crippling talent. You throw your dagger, crippling your foe, nothing too special. But if you're kiting once again or having to get out, definitely something you want to get used to. So let's finish these guys up so we can switch to the axe on the offhand, which is actually quite nice as well. I do wonder why you can actually wear an axe on your offhand and not wear a sword on your offhand. Because I like to dual wield in games like this. Oh, we have to watch out now. Oh, as you can see, it's very hard to get out of combat. So I'm gonna do that and get back to you guys. Alright, we are now out of combat and we have equipped the axe on the offhand as well. As you can see, I'm dual wielding 2 axes. And the reason why I am so fond of the axe on the offhand is because first you have Path of Scars, which is a pretty straightforward, single line attack. But it comes back to you, doing lots of damage. So very nice once again if you're kiting people around or on a choke point even. Because it does have an AoE effect as long as it goes through them. But I think this one is my most favorite animation wise. Because as you can see, looks very impressive, I have to say. I'm not sure if it actually damage wise is that nice. Because as you can see, it does very low damage. But it also blocks projectiles, which is the main application of this specific move. So, very nice nonetheless. And I believe though it's now time for underwater combat. No wait, one more, which is the torch. Which has to go in your offhand, it can't go in your main hand. And pretty straightforward, it does have a bonfire ability, which is basically a small AoE fire damage around you. Nothing too impressive. And also has the ability to throw the torch, which I think is a little bit more favorable because it does apply burning damage. Does some nice, well, decent damage on when it hits basically. It has decent range as well. But if you want to definitely be using a torch as your main weapon, I wouldn't recommend it. So we're now running basically to the water, as you can see right here, underwater trial waypoint. I'm going to teleport myself to there. And these are the training grounds, which you basically are level 80. You can train with whatever weapon you like. You have all your skills available, even if you don't have them initially available when you are just normally playing. You also have all your utilities available, but not specific race-specific utilities. You don't have those available, especially the elite ones, because Norns can turn into creatures like, let's say, the wolf or the bear, basically the spirit animals. But they can't do that on the PvP training grounds. So we are now underwater, preparing for some underwater combat. And as you can already tell, I have my harpoon gun ready. Starting off with the auto attack. As you can see, it does apply some bleeding damage as well as some basic vulnerabilities debuffs sometimes. Or at least the initial attack does that when you have it buffed up. Pretty straightforward, nothing too special. Moving on to Coral Shot, and as you can already tell, it shoots a coral type projectile, which applies certain debuffs like the cripple as well as some more bleeding effects. Feeding Frenzy, as you can see, it applies fury to your pet, but it also does some quite funny things to the enemy itself. As you can see, blood everywhere. Basically, you send piranhas to your enemies. So, not sure if you want to be doing that, if you want to, well, want to do it in a more fancy way, because you don't actually see piranhas, but the damage is alright considering for a pretty spammable ability, only a 10-second cooldown. Alright, Mercy Shot. As you can see, the less health the target has, the more damage it does. There are multiple abilities like this. Like I believe the Thief has an ability like that. I think it's called Heartseeker. The lower the health, the more damage you do. And as you can see, my damage is slowly going up the lower the target becomes with this ability right here. 2.1k fully when it was almost dead. So when it's almost dead, it's pretty nice to execute with this ability. Ink Blast, which is your defensive ability when you're under the water. Allows you to go backwards, as you saw. And also it blinds people that go through that ink. and that's your harpoon gun for you. But we also have a spear, which is a little bit more traditional, I suppose. And you have to get up and close and personal, if you like, with the enemy itself. You basically stab him if you get close enough. Does do some decent damage, especially on crits. And also applies the bleeding effects, of course. Swirling Strike attacks with reflecting projectiles, so nice AoE, and it does reflect your projectiles, which is basically similar to the X version on the high ground, or on the land itself, I should say. As you can see, Dart, pretty straightforward as well. Does have that spirit feedback once again of a shark, so quite nice as well. Does apply debuffs once again, but I think it's very nice. It's your underwater charge, basically. That's how you're supposed to use it, or that's how I would use it. Counter Strike, also underwater you have a Counter Strike, pretty straightforward, but also, as you saw, I clicked it once again before the cast was over, and it still counts as a range attack, just like the two-handed swords. And a Man of War, which is your ultimate, I suppose. Man of War, pretty straightforward. Once again, having that Spirit Beast feedback, a jellyfish, I believe it's called. I was almost going to say octopus, but I'm pretty sure it was a jellyfish. And doesn't do too much of debuffs, but it does immobilize your enemies. And if you get up and close with them, it does do some nice damage as well, if you actually can get the cast off and don't interrupt it, because you're smart like that. But you do have to hit the enemies, and it seems to be rather difficult to actually properly hit somebody with it, so you want to pay attention to that. And it does seem that my bear doesn't really enjoy swimming, but that is underwater combat for you. These are all the skills available to the hunter with the respected weapons. And if you want to see more or have any suggestions, make sure to let them know in the comment section below. If you want to see more Guild Wars 2 content, make sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.